We talk about street crimes and white-collar crimes. I don't know what page you have. And political deviance. What I mentioned to you on Monday is one example of political deviance. It's considered a form of white-collar crime. Corruption, bribery, kickbacks, all these things, secrecy, lack of transparency, pollution, toxic waste. Some companies, they want to maximize what? Profits, revenues, and minimize costs. So sometimes they build factories in any parts of the world, the US, another country. Sometimes they make the workers in the factories do overtime. They have many shifts. This can eventually contribute to what? Pollution, toxic waste. And some agricultural companies, maybe they want to increase crop production. They use certain fertilizers that are high in salinity. It's not good for the soil. Who still needs to sign in? Can we go one more round? Just go one more round, thank you. So, they use certain fertilizer that are high in certain chemicals or high in salinity. It's not good for the soil. I mean, it increases the crop production and whatnot. But sometimes the water can go through the soil, our drinking water. So it affects our health indirectly or directly. So this can be another example of a white-collar crime. If those companies, they want to maximize sales and revenues and profits, they take it to the extreme. They got caught. Apparently FDA comes in investigations and they were found guilty. They will be committing a white-collar crime. Anybody heard of the incident happened at the Firestone Tire Company decades ago? The Firestone Tire Company. I think it's in the 80s or late 70s. I don't recall. I'm old. So this tire company, they wanted to maximize revenues. They lie about the lifespan of the tires. They say it lasts a lot longer than what truly were. So people bought that. Wow, it's a good price for this kind of tire. It lasts us longer. People bought their tires. Accidents happen. Deaths happens. So that's another example of a white-collar crime. Embezzlement, yeah. Antitrust violations. Sometimes people go through maybe somewhat dishonest means to monopolize the whole market. Antitrust laws got involved. This would be another example of a white-collar crime. So, corporate crime is another example of a white-collar crime. It's a subset of a white-collar crime, if you think in terms of math. Oh, the famous savings and loan scandal. Decades ago, about 3 decades ago in your country. And my country had a savings and loan scandal too. Oh, it cost 600 million because of that. And deregulation happens during that time, apparently. So people are more inclined to engage in risky investments. And some of those high bank executives, they channel some funds to fund some of the election campaigns through improper means. Not through the proper means. It wasn't on the book. They were caught. Lawsuits. Some went to prison. I bet it happens in many countries. The savings and loan scandal, especially during election time. Sometimes those high corporate executives, they may have some connections with top politicians, running members of the party. And they may do similar things, channel some funds illegally. They got caught. That's another classic example of a corporate crime. Corporate crime is a kind of white-collar crime. Enron. Anybody heard of Enron, the scandal? Maybe all these were before the days you were born. You were too young. I understand. So Enron, apparently, that company was making losses. But they hid it in their books, in their journals, in their bookkeeping, accounting. They hid it. They don't want the general public to know. So the top guns of that company, Enron, they hid it. Apparently, maybe they were so intimidating, the top guns, top executives. They were so intimidating, apparently, because all big companies like Enron, I'm sure you know, have a legal department or they hire a few lawyers. The lawyers could have said something if the lawyers have a sense of conscience. But apparently, according to Dr. Bing or Dr. Google, the legal department or the lawyers were afraid of those board of directors, the big guns. They did not say anything. I'm sure they knew about something. And apparently, big companies like Enron are required to have external auditors. If lawyers are afraid to say something, I'm sure the internal auditors of Enron were afraid to say something too. And these folks, they are smart people. They went to school, they got their credentials, degrees and whatnot. I'm sure they saw something not right from the books when they did the books. So, if you Google this case, it seemed that, the employees of that company were intimidated by the top guns. Even the external auditors were maybe intimidated, who knows. When they audit the company from time to time, I'm sure they found out too, and they did not say anything. I think Arthur Andersen, I think now it's Andersen Consulting, was their external auditor at that time. So people blame Arthur Andersen too. When that scandal was publicized, the general public blamed Arthur Andersen. Because of that, the reputation of Arthur Andersen was somewhat tarnished. So eventually it's being found out. Lawsuits one after another. The company went belly up. So this is another example of a corporate or white-collar crime. Oh, so many data breach these days. Most recent one is what? Equifax, our credit reporting agency. Oh no. Wow, even our credit data is not safe with agencies like that. Oh, crazy world out there. And the other ones are Target. They lost close to 150 billion. Home Depot, they lost some money. Wow, close to 60 million cards were affected. When these things happen, sometimes credit cards company, to protect their customers, they have to take all the trouble to reissue all the cards. You see, people are affected directly or indirectly. It creates more job for people. When corporate or white-collar crime happens, an email address was stolen. The same thing like the recent Equifax incident. Dairy Queen, it happens like maybe 2-3 years ago. It involved close to 400 stores countrywide. Kmart, Staples, the Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank in Turkey. All their system and data have been hacked. Accounts were affected. Data, important data were affected. So if you turn to page 174 or anywhere that says the conflict perspective, I don't know what you have. The conflict 178. The page that says the conflict perspective. So the functionalist perspective, says that deviance and crime serve a function in society. But conflict perspective, it originates from the idea that different groups of people have unequal power and resource basis, and because of that, they are constantly in conflict with one another, the conflict perspective. So, the conflict perspective assumes that people who design, who makes, or who creates those laws have unequal power basis with the other people who have to obey those laws. Sometimes this creates a conflict. The Jim Crow law, segregation laws in the South decades ago, can be one example. People who are affected by those laws may be on different power basis, different resource base than the creators of those laws. The same for apartheid in South Africa. And the same for certain laws in certain countries that forbids women to drive. You can understand those social phenomena from a conflict perspective. The creators of the law may be most likely men, who knows, in those highly patriarchal countries. And people affected by the laws are the women. They cannot drive to get their kids to school. What happens if their kids are sick? And sometimes the same incident or phenomena, like drug use, affects people from different socio-economic backgrounds differently. Drug use, drug addiction, substance abuse. The rich people, if they have this problem, maybe it's covered by their insurance. They can check themselves into a rehab covered by insurance. Oh, it's a medical condition. We will fix it. Don't worry, sir. Don't worry, madam. For the poor people who do not have a permanent job, no insurance, no proper insurance, if they get caught, it's a crime, am I right? In certain parts of your country or in certain parts of the world, if you get caught for possessing, using drugs, oh, too bad, it's a crime. You cannot afford a rehab, it's a crime for you, too bad. So you can also view this incident from a conflict theory perspective. So as you can see from the few examples we talked about, we can see how the functionalist perspective and conflict perspective, they view crime and deviance from different angles, right? And people, elites, the working class, the lower class, the middle class, all kinds of groups in this society, in any society, they have different resource and power bases. And sometimes deviance and criminal acts are going to affect them differently. They are going to bear the consequences due to their deviant or criminal acts in different ways, like drug use. And in some country, we just talk about the criminal justice system. They put women in a subordinate position. Women are not allowed to drive. It's against the law. And another example would be, if you consult Dr. Google, Dr. Bing, Dr. Safari, you will find that in all these juvenile detention centers, in all these prisons, jails and whatnot, female felons are more likely to be abused. So some researchers or some sociologists say that you can view this incident from a conflict theory perspective. Are we clear now? So the justice system don't only discriminate based on gender in certain countries. Maybe it happens in most countries in the world, in different scenarios being played out. So any questions about how the conflict theories perceive crime and deviance? Any questions? And go to the page, I don't know what you have, that says the medicalization of deviance. Can we have some volunteer for page numbers? Who is kind enough? What page do we have? Medicalization of deviance and mental health. That's what my book says. 188. Okay. So, maybe certain instances, substance abuse, excessive alcohol use. Families used to deal with those issues privately. It's a family's, a household and individual's private matter, right? In our grandparents' or ancestors' generation. The same for impotence, infertility. It used to be a person's, a family's private matter in our grandparents' generation or prior to that. The same for ADHD. When I was a student in the 80s, sometimes, some of my classmates, they were hyperactive in class. Teacher punished them. Teachers, maybe, they were not aware that they had to find out whether the student had ADHD. So all these things, people dealt with that as part and parcel of their normal life. The same for PMS. Women go through that a few days every month. It's part and parcel of life. Menopause. Women are going to go through that when we hit a certain age. It's a normal stage of development. That's how our ancestors or grandparents or even parents' generation perceive that. But nowadays, you turn on your TV, commercials on TV, they sell drugs on PMS, try to alleviate the symptom, which is not a bad thing. So when they do that, or they sell drugs about infertility, or some companies, yes, we have that in Asia. If we have that in Asia, I bet you have that in your country. They claim that, if you want a child of a certain gender, we can manipulate it. They advertise that on TV sometimes. So all these things, they used to be people's private matter. Just a normal circumstances people go through in certain stages of our life becomes medicalized under the scrutiny of medical community. Now PMS is a medical condition. The same for infertility. They even invented a word for alcoholism. ADHD. You name it. So this is the medicalization of deviance. Drug use, substance abuse, maybe considered somewhat abnormal in most societies. And in our grandparents' generation, people just live through it. They may take precautions, but they don't publicize them. And maybe PMS, if the lady is truly in pain, is considered a deviant. In a sense, and you know what I mean. But now, they have all kinds of treatment and drugs for that. The same thing for menopause. Menopause is not considered a deviant. My 2 cents. I don't think sociologists consider menopause a deviant. It's just a stage, a phase women go through eventually. And now, there are so many drugs for menopause, Oh, to stop it, to prevent it, to prolong it, you name it. And the same for maybe certain families, Asian families. Sons are important in most Asian families. If the family cannot produce a son, oh my God, no heir. Maybe in my grandparents' generation, they went to a traditional doctor privately. It's a private matter. Wow, nowadays, all these drug companies, they advertise how to fix infertility. If you want children of a given sex or gender, oh, we can fix that too. Because in those days, maybe not having a child, infertility, is considered deviant in many cultures. But people dealt with that privately, secretly. And nowadays it's different. How people view all these issues. So are you clear about the concept of medicalization of deviance? I wrote your exams already, but you may have a quiz. Who knows? Depends on my mood. So don't forget chapter 6. And this looks like a very good quiz question. White collar crime, street crime, and medicalization of deviance. I think your book does not talk about hate crimes, or I cannot find it. And this is from my previous university. So, you will not get a quiz, but I'll talk about it briefly. We see a lot of this lately, right? I think a lot of the instances that's happened lately, you see that on TV, on YouTube, they fall into this category. Is criminal acts that's against a person or property. The incident in Las Vegas, Charlottesville, Tennessee, you name it. Or, I don't know, maybe not my previous university. It was just between two professors, no. So hate crimes are often motivated by age, sex, race, sometimes socio-economic backgrounds. People from one income group may attack people from another income group. Maybe they feel unjust, unfair. They feel they are being shortchanged. It can happen. Anybody heard of the Asian economic crisis? 1998 to 1999. Or you're too young, you haven't been born. So during the Asian economic crisis, the Chinese usually, we do not have political power in Southeast Asia. But most of the Chinese, not my family, they have economic power. They run large businesses. So during the Asian economic crisis, when most people were affected, they lose their jobs, they got a pay cut, all kinds of things happened to them. And when they saw some of the rich Chinese in Southeast Asia were not affected, they looted the stores of those people. They looted and they robbed the homes of those people. They raped the women of those people, the Chinese, the rich Chinese in Southeast Asia. So this was an example of hate crime that happened in Southeast Asia. And sometimes hate crimes can happen due to religious reasons, or due to a person's culture, traditions, values, belief or norms. When one group of people cannot stand the culture, the tradition, the value, the beliefs of another group, and wow, they were violent against another group. Wow, they just committed hate crimes against that group. Too bad. So any questions? I think we wrapped up chapter 6.